Hey, hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in today to talk about Kagurabachi, chapter number 46. This chapter is titled Unruly Punk. And, golly, this is a great chapter of Kagurabachi, if I have to say so. Granted, I think most chapters of Kagurabachi are extremely good, but I think this one has a lot of good elements to it. Now, there is one overwhelming problem with this chapter, as I'll get into as we start on the discussion of the chapter, which will be coming a bit later, as we'll see here in a minute, but there'll be timestamps for all of the sections of this video down below, because I think with everything I want to talk about, this video could end up being a little bit of a longer video this time, right? But like I said, the one overwhelming problem with this chapter that we're going to see is that, of course, as we all know, what happened last time in Kagurabachi, where Chihiro, we pretty much did the whole wrap-up to the, not really Rakuzachi, but, like, the in-between chapter between, of course, we knew that, like, Chihiro's like, all right, I'm going to go join the Kabanagi, and last chapter was pretty much just, like, him and Hyuki, Haruki, Shiba, Tafuku, and Char are all pretty much talking about the strategy of how Chihiro is going to get in contact with sword bearers, and the plan that they're going to use, which is using Haruki's registration technique and the storehouse phenomenon to pretty much be able to transport the enchanted blades away from the Hishaku, right? And last time we got a look at all of the other members of the sword bearer group or the sword master group. I think they get more referred to as sword bearers in this chapter, if I'm not mistaken. So, that's sort of what it is there, but there's a lot of really good in this chapter. But before we get into all of that massively good in this chapter, Kagurabachi has had a lot of events going on recently, so I sort of want to sit down here and sort of break down a lot of this information that we've been getting. Now, if you just want to get straight to the chapter view, I'm going to have a section labeled down below, of course in the timestamps, where you'll just see like all of the information here and like the breakdowns of like the first anniversary stuff, the award Kagurabachi won, and all of that other stuff. You'll pretty much just see like chapter starts, and that is where you will want to go to start a chapter review, right? But yeah, I'm actually going to try to record my screen here for this because I've got about 5 tweets here that I want to go through from various different sources about all of the different Kagurabachi news that has been going on here recently. So let me just get my screen recording real quick. I should have probably thought about getting this going before, but all right. Is it going to work? Sorry, I probably should have figured this off a second or two ago. All right, there we go. Recording screen, we're going to share it. All right, and here we are. So as you see right here, I'm on Twitter right now, and the first announcement we have comes from the Shonen Jump News account on Twitter. This is a great account, Weekly Shonen Jump Manga. They do a lot of great information on all of the series running in Jump and Jump Plus, and anything sort of Suecia related. They do a bunch of really great stuff on this. So as you see here, yes, Kagurabachi will be commemorating its first anniversary with the following projects. Today, the day I'm recording this video on, is Saturday, August 31st of 2024, and Kagurabachi's anniversary chapter will be tomorrow. So tomorrow is the day when Kagurabachi will be getting the next magazine cover, and it is the time when Kagurabachi is celebrating its first anniversary because its first chapter was put out. Let's go to Viz real quick, see the full chapter list. Its first chapter here, September 17th. So we're getting that first anniversary stuff of Kagurabachi, so it's time for us to have first anniversary projects, right? Girl Meets Rock collab illustration for respective figures at Sugini Kuru Manga Awards 2024. Talk about that in a second. A mob sorcerer art contest, which is a very interesting thing if you guys have not heard about this. Pretty much it's going to be sort of an art contest where people will draw their own mob sorcerers, I say that in quotation marks, and send them in to the author, Takeru Hokuzono, and they will have, whoever wins will have their mob sorcerer cut down by Chihiro in a future color page of the series. It's a really cool idea, and for the Kagurabachi fandom, it's just a brilliant idea, and I really love how this sort of contest is coming in. And then, as Shonen Jump News also points out, merch including acrylic stickers and mascot characters. Makes sense, first year anniversary, big deal, and with how the series has been selling, which is something we'll get to in a second, really big, awesome news for Kagurabachi here, right? The next set of tweets comes from Kagurabachi Brazil. If any of you guys are on Twitter, you know who Kagurabachi Brazil is. They are an amazing account, and sadly, with the ban that has just happened with Twitter in Brazil, I think it's a stupid thing, but I don't really want to get too much into that. Kagurabachi Brazil is now on Blue Sky, which is the Twitter alternative that came out like 2 or 3 years ago now at this point. So I'll also say this, I'll have all of these links to all of these tweets and everything down in the description. So yeah, if you want to follow him on Blue Sky or even Kagurabachi Brazil on Twitter, where they can't actually access right now, whatever. But yes, then this next tweet's pretty much getting to the point that Kagurabachi won first place in the Sugi Manga Awards. This is also the same thing as the Next Manga Awards. So as you sort of see here, it says in this little image here with the video, it says, hey, Next Manga Awards, Sugi Manga Awards, first place. It won first place in the print category, if I'm not mistaken, because there is a web and there's a print category. The series that actually won the web category was that Girl Meet Rock series that we saw earlier, has a collab illustration for the respective victories at Sugi no Kuru Manga Awards. Next Manga Awards, this is a very, very massive thing. It won hand over fist with here, as we'll see here, 100,000 points, while second place had about 30,000, which is an insane thing right now. But awesome, Kagurabachi won this manga awards thing, and it's just a really awesome thing. Next tweet here, we got a illustration from Hokuzono Sensei himself, pretty much showing up like, hey, this is Kagurabachi. A really nice illustration here of Chihiro. Of course, it is still using those same colors that I think are the only colors he knows how to use, which is literally this red, gray, and black, and a little bit of white mixed in there too. It's going to be really awesome when Kagurabachi gets to its 100th chapter and hopefully gets like a color page for it, or maybe like a double page spread. And we have like the blue sky and like yellow flowers. I really hope that's what happened, because I don't want this one color scheme to be the entire series at this point. But this is a nice little illustration from the official Kagurabachi Twitter account. So really awesome illustration by Hokuzono Sensei there. Next up is what I was getting to a moment ago. This is the other winners of the Next Manga Awards from Weekly Shonen Jump in past years. So as we see here, My Hero Academia won in 2015, Undead Unluck won it in 2020, and of course Kagurabachi has now won it in 2024. And I don't really care what you say, but we all know My Hero Academia was a massive hit success in Jump, running for 430 chapters. You honestly can't get much better than that, and extremely good sales and so much more. And Undead Unluck, while it hasn't had the best sales in Shonen Jump, it is still an amazing series that I read literally every week, and it's one of my high points of the week. It's like, man, hey, new Undead Unluck chapter. Now, not to talk about Undead Unluck in the Kagurabachi chapter reviews, but Undead Unluck I do have a few issues with it. Pacing at some point feels really off, but what's recently happened in the manga is just like peak total fiction. I mean, you honestly can't beat it. And now Kagurabachi, which is a series that I am enjoying enough to do chapter reviews of, has now won it, so really awesome to see there. Yeah, so just really awesome that Kagurabachi not only won the Suki Manga Awards, but or the Next Manga Award, but has done so well in general since then. And on terms of Kagurabachi doing well, from the official Kagurabachi X Twitter account, there are more than 600,000 copies in circulation, with 3 volumes. Let me say that again. For a new series with 3 volumes out of Weekly Shonen Jump, 600,000 copies in circulation. Now, this is sort of getting a little off topic here, but let me duplicate this page right here, and then let's just go to the Weekly Shonen Jump News manga account. So what this manga account does is they put up circulation numbers every so often. So as you sort of see right here, and sort of getting to where I was talking about, what's it called, Undead Unluck a second ago, with 13 volumes is the last time we got any information on it. It only had 1,800,000 copies in circulation, or 1.8 million copies, which is still really good. But think about Kagurabachi. Kagurabachi has a third of this, with 3 volumes, and Undead Unluck has it with 13. This just goes to say that Kagurabachi is selling extremely well. It's pretty much settling on pace, if I can find where that tab was, with what Ruri Dragon did with 1 volume, selling 200,000 copies. And as we see here, Kagurabachi, whenever it had 2 volumes, we got the announcement it had 200 copies in circulation. But now with 3 volumes having 600,000, this series is doing extremely well. So really awesome seeing. We got this information because of the Obi, which is the so of course Japanese manga volumes have slipcovers, but on top of those slipcovers there are either other slipcovers or like little leaflets done, or it's just printed onto the cover itself. I don't know which one this is here, for instance, but that's what the Obi is, and we know that because it's got that, and 600,000 copies is just so awesome right there. But yeah, again, follow all of these accounts on the various places. I've talked about the weekly Shonen Jump manga account for on the channel. Kagurabachi Brazil, while they are no longer have access to Twitter, they of course are on Blue Sky, but I would definitely recommend, if you want to keep in touch with any part of the Kagurabachi fandom, follow both of these pages. There's nothing wrong with it. And also, Kagurabachi Brazil even made a Kagurabachi fan community on Twitter, which is really awesome to see. But all of that out of the way, I think it's finally time that I turn off this screen recording here, because I will get banned if stop sharing. There we go. We're going to save that and exit it. And now let's get into talking about the chapter itself here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little bit of the Kagurabachi news segment here, but I felt like there was a whole lot of stuff to talk about, and I just really want to talk about it. And I didn't necessarily think I would need to make a separate video to talk about all of that great Kagurabachi information, but who really knows? So to start off with this chapter of Kagurabachi, again, this is chapter number 46, titled Unruly Punk. We start off exactly where we were last time. Let me take a drink real quick so my throat doesn't like kill me, but so we start off with the head of the Kabunagi pretty much sitting there. And of course, the last thing that happened was Chihiro said, all right, my name is Chihiro Rokuhira, right? And he's like, I've come to join the Kabunagi. I don't remember if he said that or whatever. But pretty much what we get here is we get the Kabunagi leader to say like, all right, Chihiro Rokuhira, step forward. And Chihiro sort of steps forward, and we also see who also came into the room was Hyuki Tafuku and also Hikari, who I swear, oh my gosh, Hikari and Hyuki just trip me up so incredibly much, but that's fine. And we also sort of get a little bit of a flashback with a little bit of information with Mr. Shiba pretty much saying like, hey, regarding Rokuhira and the Enchanted Blades, there are 3 various options, but for now, they're all in agreement about recovering the Enchanted Blades. There may be some hot debate over you and the Inten, but if need be, Azami will take your side, Chihiro. And he's like, if I show up, I'm 100% sure it'll just throw a wrench in the proceedings, so I'm just going to lie low during all of this. And he even says that he ended up roughing up a couple of them after Rokuhira died, right? So just a little bit of a, like, further information on Shiba in this little way, sort of seeing that what he's done for Chihiro's family and his father. So really cool to see there. And I like the idea that the reason Shiba won't show up is because he's actually done a little bit too much with these guys in the past. But as we start with the official proceedings, like I said, though, one problem with this Kagurabachi chapter is we don't really know names for any of these characters besides for Azami, pretty much. So whenever I'm talking about all of these, I'm just going to try to say like their defining characteristic. So the first guy who speaks up is actually the guy with the extended earlobe. So I'm going to call him Earlobe Guy, right? And he pretty much just starts off like, hey, I don't really see the resemblance. Like, this guy's way better looking than Rokuhira ever was, right? Like Kunishige was. And we see that Azami is sitting next to him. We see the Sideburns guy also speaks up at this point, just saying like, hey, we also don't really know if he really is Rokuhira's son yet. And as we see this, we see there's the gas mask dude right beside of him. We see a guy with an eye patch, and the guy with the eye patch is like, man, they actually do look very much alike. And we see the one woman of the group is sitting next to him. We see the shorter guy, and then we also see the long neck dude too. They don't have anything to say. But anyway, the leader of the Kabunagi just says like, all right, Well, let's begin. We will hereby determine how to deal with you and the enchanted blade, Anton, as he sort of looks directly at Chihiro in this moment. And he also just continues saying, like, hey, so first off, you say that you want to meet the sword bears to thwart the Hishaku, okay? And at this point, we sort of cut the scene over to the Kokugoku Hot Spring. Of course, this is one of the Sanso locations that we got introduced to last time. Of course, the Sanso being the locations where the other 4 sword bears are currently held. And we see inside the Sanso, the Kokugoku Hot Spring, we see that one of the other sword bears is here. It's the guy who was throwing up those gang symbols last time, pretty much. And we will learn his name later in this chapter for some reasons. And if I'm not mistaken, his name is, it's Uruha. I thought it was Uruha, but I just wanted to make sure. But we see this character we now know whose name is Uruha, and we see him sort of just sitting there lounging around in the Kokugoku Hot Springs, pretty much in a chair overlooking the entire area, right? And the Kabinagi leader just says, like, hey, we're currently sheltering the bearers of the eternal contracts with the enchanted blades at fortresses called Sanso. Of course, you already know that. High-ranking Kabinagi sorcerers are stationed at all of those locations. Even with an enchanted blade, it would be extremely hard to get past them. As we see a bunch of really interesting looking character designs, I really hope nothing happens to any of these characters later in this chapter. But we see all of these different character designs sort of acting around the fortress, of course, getting Kabinagi, right? There's really not too much interesting to say about these character designs. They're just variously interesting. I guess I need to note that one of the guys sort of has like a plague doctor mask on. It looks very interesting, but we'll get to what happens to all of these characters later. But at this point, the woman of the group speaks up and she just says, like, hey, security is extremely tight for one simple reason: to keep outsiders from making contact with the bears, right? Long Neck guy then sort of butts in, just saying, like, hey, obviously, we just can't let anybody near them. And Sideburns then says, like, hey, Rokuhira's son, huh? Well, have we done a blood test on this kid yet? So do we actually know anything? And we hear that somebody just says, like, hey, it's currently being analyzed and we'll have the results by tomorrow. As we see, like, the inside of a lab somewhere where they have a vial which seems to have Chihiro's blood inside of it, and they're, of course, running all of the necessary means for a blood test, right? But besides for that, we don't know who says this little bit of information. So yeah, at this point, Earlobes says, like, hey, so why not have this meeting tomorrow then, once we know, like, if this guy's Rokuhira's son or not? I mean, that's going to be the easiest way to sort of know anything about him, so why don't we wait? But somebody says, like, hey, we can't end up doing that. The Shinichi is currently under a temporary seal. We now see who says this. It is the shorter guy of the Kabinagi. I guess I probably could have, like, switched a page ahead to realize this, but whatever. But we see that the shorter guy just says, like, hey, we can't keep the Shinichi blade stored like that for long with this temporary seal. If we're going to seal properly, we need to move soon. And he's like, for that reason, we need to know if this plan of yours to break the deadlock and thwart the Yushaku is viable. And he sort of just repeats the plan, just saying, like, hey, make contact with the bears and teleport the enchanted blades. And he eventually looks over to where Haruki is, who is sitting on the back rows while all of this discussion is going on. And he pretty much is like, oh, so this young man is the key to your plan, huh? And he's like, well, if you got this so special power, then why don't you end up showing us, right? And Haruki's just like, well... But he isn't able to sort of get all of those words out before Hyuki sort of speaks up, just saying, like, hey, he can't do it right now. And Tafuku then speaks up, just saying, like, hey, pretty much doing, like, a previously example of it. It isn't really gray paneled, so we don't know, sort of like a flashback sort of deal. But we see later on at a different point, Tafuku's like, hey, let's try it out. Let's send this little wallet into the storehouse. And we see that Haruki tries to do it, but as soon as he tries, blood just shoots out of his nose and he isn't able to actually do it right. And we see that this is, of course, when they're driving over in the car and they're like, oh no, hey, is that like a light? And like, Haruki, oh no. But as all of that happens, Tafuku in the boardroom right now speaks up, just saying, like, hey, he only realized that power yesterday, and he went all out while doing it, so he actually needs a lot of time to rest. And Haruki's like, I'm sure I'll be able to be fine, and I'll be able to do it here in a few days, right? At this point, Hyuki speaks up, and she just says, like, hey, I witnessed all of his powers with my own eyes, and it is an extremely useful skill. But where he stands is a big pain in the butt, because he's not the one calling the shots. And we see that she points over to Chihiro and says, this guy is, as we sort of just get more of a close-up face expression on Chihiro, right? And the Kabunagi member who was the Kabunagi leader who was talking earlier, the shorter dude, just says like, hey, so then if we need to decide whether or not we should give you access to the bears. Like, so in other words, we have to decide whether or not you are trustworthy, right? And at this point, a Sideburns guy says, so explain to us then, like, what happened to the Cloud Gouger Enchanted Blade, right? And Cheer's like, it was destroyed. And at this point, we see that both Sideburns and the long neck dude just start sort of like busting out in laughter, like, you cannot be real, right? And I love the next line that we get from Sideburns guy. And she's like, all right, well, we're off to a terrible start then. Like, and you want us to actually trust you whenever you're telling us like bogus lies like that? But eventually he pipes down and he says, all right, let's say that you really are Rokuhira's son. And he's like, then you should know some of the people here already. And he's like, several of them were instrumental in establishing Kunishige Rokuhira's hideout in the mountains. You lived him with there, didn't you? And Cheer's like, yes, but my father brought me there himself. I never met any of these people. And at this point, we get an idea of 4 people who were supposedly instrumental in establishing the mountain hideout for Rokuhira. As we not only see Azami, but we see the shorter guy, we see the guy with the sort of gas mask looking thing, and the eye patch dude. We don't really know what's up with if these were the only people who were part of the Kabunagi then, who helped Rokuhira out, or what is really the details with most of these characters. Of course, we know that Chihiro has ties with Azami, but besides for that, we don't really have too much of this information. Hey guys, post-production Glowplasma 231 here. As I was editing this video, I was thinking a little bit about this chapter and sort of what I just said about how we don't really know what's up with these 4 members in specific that the short guy points out whenever he says, hey, you should know some of these people who are instrumental in helping Rokuhira hide. I don't think it's the short dude who says it. I honestly don't remember. Let me pull back up the chapter real fast, even though I just said it in the video itself, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Sideburns guy says, of course, Sideburns main antagonist of this chapter. But pretty much what I was wanting to get across here that I never actually said in the video is that we know that Rokuhira's location in the mountains, it got busted somehow, right? And Hishaku somehow learned of its location and got there, which means that most likely, and also with just a good storytelling narrative, that one of these 4 people who gets pointed out here is probably a traitor for Hishaku, or a traitor of the Kabunagi, and when working with the Hishaku, and thus how they got Rokuhira's location sort of there in the end. My personal guess, to be honest with you, is that it's probably either Azami or the eye patch dude. I don't think it's the shorter guy, because I think he's one of like the big Kabunagi leaders and probably would not do something like that, like one of the big 3 leaders that we've seen like pointed out before. I really think that maybe it's got something to do with Azami, because I feel like while Azami has a lot of, like, we know him the most out of any Kabunagi member, really, besides like Hyuki and Tefuku, and of course a former member like Shiba, he's like the best leader that we know. But I don't know. I just wanted to sort of get this thought out here that yes, one of these characters, one of these 4, is probably somebody who betrayed the Kabunagi. So just a little bit of an interesting thought there, but now back to the video, guys. And I do find it really interesting that Chihiro tells a blatant lie here of that he has never met any of these people, because factually through the series, we do know this to be completely wrong. Well, Sideburns then sort of peeks up after Chihiro says this and says like, hey, if so, we can only go off of what you say. And he's like, then Rokuhira, but Chihiro says like, hey, I'm talking about my identity. All you have is my personal word. And he says, forget who I am, judge me based on what I have done. I stopped Sojo, I destroyed the Rakuzachi, and I reclaimed the Shinuchi. And he says, was any of that bad for the Kabunagi? I saved you guys a lot of money that you guys were actually planning to spend. And we see the earlobe guy sort of goes into a bit of a ponder, just going like, I mean, he isn't wrong about any of that. At this point, Hyuki sort of just speaks up again from the back row and just says like, hey, if you guys are afraid that Chihiro might hurt the sword bearers, allow me to say one thing. I'm absolutely sure he won't. He only kills evildoers. And hearing Hyuki say this, Chihiro sort of just turns around and looks at her. And at this point, he sort of looks back to the rest of the Kabunagi guard around him, right? All of these leaders. The masked guy just says like, hey, that's actually quite a statement coming from Hyuki. Like, you know, she doesn't give that high praise about people. And earlobe guy even says like, oh, come on, how come Hyuki doesn't even say that stuff about me? A little funnier there. But Hyuki then just sort of makes another anecdote, just saying like, all right, creepy old man. And as all of this happens, we take a look to that back row where there's an amazing panel of Hyuki just sitting here laying back, as at this point we look over to see where Tafuku and Haruki are, and the two of them are just like fist busting, hearing Hyuki give this positive praise to Chihiro, right? And knowing that this probably helps push this vote in one direction or the other, right? Well, after this sort of happens, all of a sudden, Sideburns stands up, clattering the chair behind him as he does, because there's a little sound effect and panel here with like the clatter sound. And Sideburn gets up and stands right behind Chihiro, putting his arm over his shoulder, right? And he says, so you want us to judge you based on what you've done? Well, you look like an unruly punk to me. And he's like, tell me one thing. So you get the enchanted blades back. Then what do you want to do with them? Will you just surrender them to us? What's going on here? And we sort of see Chihiro's face, and it looks like he is really sweating as he doesn't say a single thing to Sideburns. We get an up-close shot of the Kabunagi leader's face as Sideburn just continues saying like, hey, we don't need a blood test after all. You are Rokuhiro's son, all right. And he's like, arrogant and pig-headed. Here's how we end up breaking the deadlock. As we see that, of course, after he gives this acknowledgement that, okay, he believes that this is Rokuhiro's son by the way he's acting, which is a really great way to have a character moment, just going like, this guy is just like his father. He's an arrogant and pig-headed. It's a great sort of moment here. And from this, we can sort of get the idea that Sideburns here didn't particularly like Rokuhiro. I mean, at some point we will definitely be getting a Rokuhiro flashback in this series, seeing why he made the Enchanted Blades, what was up with all of that, yada 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 yada, and sort of seeing what all of these Kabunagi's relationship were with the Master Swordsman here, or the Master Blade Craftsman, whatever you want to call him. But as I say this, Sideburns takes his hand off Chihiro's shoulder and just says like, hey, here's how we'll break the deadlock. We kill you. As all of a sudden, as he does this, he moves in front of Chihiro and he holds out his hand and summons some sorcery in front of him, right in front of Chihiro's face. And Sideburn just continues saying like, hey, didn't we entrust the Inten to a member of the Kabunagi? That's clearly the best bet for the Kabunagi, is it not? And we sort of get a close-up on Chihiro's face here. She's like, oh man, this guy's about to kill me here, right? We get a close-up on Haruki's face as we see that Haruki has suddenly summoned the Iso mask over his eye, sort of getting like, if somebody ends up trying to hurt Chihiro, he's going to go after them tenfold. Like, that's the relationship that Chihiro and Haruki have. It's really awesome to see. And in the same moment, we see Azami, who suddenly sort of pushes out his chair behind him, and he stands up, and we see he starts to conjure up his own personal sorcery in his hand. And what we see is a little lightning bolt. Now, of course, the first time Azami was introduced back in, like, what was that? Chapter 5, if I'm not mistaken? Maybe 5 or 6, I don't quite 100% remember, but we saw that Azami was, of course, doing all of his sorcery stuff and being like a goofball and like, oh man, I can't believe I'm actually hurt from doing all of this, right? And we saw that there was some like sort of lightning stuff that happened, and we didn't know if it was part of Azami's personal sorcery or if he was just super strong and that was one of the other person's sorcery that he was taking out, one of the mob sorcerers, right? But here we clearly see that Azami's sorcery probably has something to do with lightning of some kind. So very interesting here to sort of know that, like, we're sort of like getting more of this idea on what everybody's sorcery is as we go on with the series here, right? But as Sideburns is like, all right, we're going to kill you, and like both Haruki and Azami get ready to leap into action to protect Chihiro, all of a sudden a guy runs into the boardroom, right? And this Kabinagi member just is like, hey, excuse me, just a little while ago, the Kokugoku fortress was invaded. And all of a sudden the Kabinagi member's like, invaded? You better tell me that everything's okay here, right? And this Kabinagi member's like, hey, according to eyewitness reports, after confirming several assassins and multiple spirit energy reactions characteristic of enchanted blades, the fortress was annihilated. As we get these very interesting images here of seeing the members of, or sort of seeing inside the Kokugoku fortress, where we see a bunch of these sorcerers who are protecting the area there. So the big interesting thing here with all of these sorcerers here who are protecting the Kokugoku fortress are, if you guys remember the anti-Cloud Gouger special forces, of course there were a bunch of members of that, there were 6 of them, and as far as we know, 4 of them died. And most interestingly, we see the captain of that squad, who was Ikuto Hagiwara. We actually sort of see him in this panel, sort of standing in the background as all of this is happening, and sort of using his sorcery. We can sort of tell by what looks like his grown out hair ponytail thing. It may not end up being him, but it really seems like this is Ikuto, because from what we know, he didn't actually pass on, he didn't die. So it is a little interesting to see, like, okay, maybe this character is still around. But also maybe not, because we get this other 2-page spread of like the fortress was annihilated, right? Now the interesting about this image right here of where he said the fortress was annihilated, Kagurabachi does this type of panel layout every so often, right? And I have come to call these story panels. I don't know if most of you guys have sort of recognized this yet, but normally whenever Kagurabachi does a full page spread, it does a either full page spread or it does more of a kept in full page spread, where instead of being like the full page as a panel, it is bordered off with the border around it. Just go to page 14 of this chapter to get what I'm actually talking about. As we see this image of the Kokugoku Hot Spring completely destroyed and broken. We see a whole bunch of pretty much blood running down all of the hot spring waterways. It looks like all of the sort of lantern things are destroyed in the area. Just pretty much the entire Kokugoku fortress has gone to shit. And most importantly, that's where we know, I forgot his name already. Let me look here. Where does it say it? Uruha. I'll get that into my brain at some point, but we know that the sword bearer Uruha is here. So what's going on with him? What's the big deal? We'll get to that at the end of the chapter. But very interesting to see. This story panel is also like whenever Haruki put all of the bombs onto the area, whenever he came up with these. So we got this sort of panel for all of those moments in the series. So I find that very interesting. See here, we got another sort of one of these story panels here with the fortress, the Sanso, being completely destroyed here, right? Well, as this happens, we see that, who's his face? Sideburns sort of hears all this, like, what are you talking about, right? And as this sorcerer, not the sorcerer, the Kabinagi member who's sort of breaking all of this news, just is like, and hey guys, there's also a sighting of a man with an emblem resembling flames on the back of his hand. Obviously, one of the Hishaku members, right? And we even see that Sideburns says, like, damn it, the Hishaku, right? And at this point, the long neck guy just says, like, hey, and the enchanted blade bearer, was Uruha killed? And at this point, like, Cheers is like, so this was the Hishaku's next move, directly assassinating the sword bearers. They probably wanted the Kabinagi to be too trapped up with not only me, but also the Shinuchi, to think about fully protecting all of these sword bearers. And they're like, crap, like, this is a really, really big deal here, right? And of course, after Longneck guy asks, like, hey, was Uruha killed? The news bearer Kabinagi guy just is like, hey, we're still trying to determine that. And at this point, the shorter Kabinagi guy just says, like, hey, so multiple spirit energy reactions characteristic of enchanted blades. But how are they doing this, right? And all of a sudden, Chihiro has a realization. he thinks back to Tenri during the Rakuzachi and the auction house arc, right? Which I guess was yesterday by the means of this entire arc, but whatever. But he remembers Tenri and how he used one of those Dainseki orbs, pretty much, to gain spirit energy powers himself, right? And Chihiro's like, so they must have a lot of those Dainseki pieces. Like, wow, that's really interesting. And he even thinks back further to something we saw earlier in the series of why would the Hishaku have entrusted Cloud Gouger, the only usable enchanted blade, to Sojo? Because they had this other power that was currently being manifested, right? And at this point, Chihiro sort of stands here and he just says like, hey, they are ready now, and Hishaku is going to attack the other sword bearers soon. And he's like, hey, you guys are right. When I get the enchanted blades back, I have no intention of handing them over to the Kabunagi or anyone else. Once I get them back, we will both be enemies again, right? And he's like, hand over Inten to someone else? If they're Kabunagi, there'd be less risk. It'd be a wise choice. But there's currently no time. A new bear wouldn't be able to master Inten overnight. You need immediate fighting power, and I'm your best. As all of a sudden, hearing this, we sort of see that some of the Kabunagi members sort of get this flashback to Rokuhiro's face during a previous time. And what I'm sort of headcanoning this is, as this is a point when like maybe the war was being really, really bad, and Rokuhiro came to the Kabunagi saying like, hey, you guys need to get swords made to be able to break this current deadlock in the war we're facing, right? Well, I'm your best bet. As pretty much as Sideburns hears Chihiro say this and sort of gets a flashback of Kunishige Rokuhiro, he says, enough, you little fucking punk, right? And Gas Mask just is like, hey, stop it, like, don't get into a fight now, right? And Earlobes just is like, he's pretty cool. He's definitely Rokuhiro's son. So I sort of love how everybody's sort of like, all right, this is definitely Rokuhiro's son for many different reasons here, sort of, right? And all of a sudden, the Kabunagi leader just is like, hey, remove the cups. And Sideburns like, are you insane? Like, what are you thinking right now, right? And the leader says like, hey, he's right. We don't have a moment to lose. We have no time to appoint a new bear. He came to negotiate with us, and the Hishaku are already on the offensive. The latter are an immediate threat, obviously talking about the Hishaku, right? And he says like, hey, Chihiro, Rokuhiro, for now we will use you. However, we have no intention of letting you do as you please with the enchanted blades. As Chihiro pretty much nods in response, we get a little panel of Zami just like breathing out like, all right, I won't have to fight some of the other Kabunagi people. Like, they have accepted Chihiro now. Like, whew, so much better, right? But at this point, the leader speaks up again, just saying like, hey, we have a new report. The bear is alive. The bear escaped the fortress and is currently in flight. We'll provide guidance. You two make contact with them immediately and protect their life. As we get this final panel of Iruha, the sword bearer here at the Sanso, is sort of running on the outskirts of it, sort of running away. We sort of see that he's got his traditional like Japanese Ronin hat on. I don't know what they're called, but that's sort of what I'm calling it. And we see that he's sort of got like a hand on it, sort of running away from the fortress, right? And of course, the final panel of the chapter, we see that Chihiro, and we now see that Haruki is standing behind him. And the whole idea, these two characters are going to go to the fortress to save the day. And that is where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi. This is a really, really good chapter for a bunch of reasons. Like I said, the main sort of detracting reason from it is we don't know any of these characters' names, but in the way of reading manga, it's not a problem because they all have unique enough character designs where you can take a look at them and say, all right, this is obviously this dude. He's got sideburns. He doesn't. You can clearly tell that. And it really only becomes an issue when actually sitting here and talking about this series in the sort of review format that I like to do it in, right? But this is a very good sort of build up on these ideas of sort of like, all right, going through, can the Kabunagi trust Chihiro? Chihiro says a few things, sort of says like, I really love his sort of whole thing of like, hey, forget who I am and judge me based on what I've done in relation to helping you guys out, sort of. Very interesting. Hyuki standing up for Chihiro here is a really, really cool moment, and I really love to see how both Tafuku and Hyuki are now sort of part of the sort of main Chihiro allies group, which is really, really awesome to see. So now it's sort of like, all right, we had Shiba, we had Hanao, we had Char, then we got Hikari, now we have Hyuki and Tafuku. It's just really cool to see all of these characters coming together around Chihiro to be his friends, when his whole thing was like, I'm going to wake up in the morning with fresh hatred, right? I really like Sideburns guy. I think his motivations throughout this chapter are really interesting, and you can tell that he didn't really like Kunishige Rokuhira, and I feel like that's a really interesting dynamic that we'll of course get more on later. But I can also tell him maybe being the sort of character who also protect Chihiro the most out of most of these people when certain things come to maybe happen to him. But of course we will sort of get on all of that later. And then that sort of page turn halfway through the chapter, just going like, hey, the enchanted, the Sanso has been attacked, enchanted blade users, the Hishaku are there, it's a really big deal, and all of a sudden we're suddenly breaking into, all right, we now have a mission. I'm guessing by the end of next chapter, both Chihiro and Hikari will have probably made contact with Iruha, so it will be pretty interesting to see, but that is where we're sort of going forward with this series here, right? Golly, this is just a really awesome chapter. It really shows why Kagurabachi is an amazing series, and of course, like as I talked about earlier, the series has so much going for it right now. We're reaching that 1-year anniversary. I mean, heck, Kagurabachi has lead color page next week, so we get a 2-page spread and a magazine cover, which is just like amazing. We have that new art from Hokuzono Sensei on Chihiro himself, right? It won the next manga awards. It's got 600,000 copies in circulation. There's just so much good going on here with this series right now that really makes me excited to read more Kagurabachi and sort of just experience the series for being as awesome as it is, right? But that's really all I've got to say about this chapter. I'm sure I've rambled on for way too long, especially with doing a chapter review in addition to doing like a news video at the same time. Probably for view's sake, I probably should split these two up so people don't think I'm just constantly talking about the entire chapter for this long, but whatever. Who really cares? I don't do this channel with like, hey, I need to make the most money from views off of it, because I mean, I don't even make any money off it. This is like my hobby, and I love talking about these manga series, so I wouldn't do anything else. But if you do want to help me out, maybe help me make some money eventually, there's a few things you can do. Subscribe to the channel, go check out some of the other Kagurabachi videos. There'll be a playlist linked down in the description, along with all of the Twitter and all of those other news articles I got earlier. And I'd say news article, they were all like Twitter, they were all tweets, so like I'll leave all of that down in the description down below. And yeah, I really don't have too much else to say. Really great chapter. Yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Of course, like I said, we got a color page next time, along with the magazine spread itself, so that'll be really awesome. But yeah, again, this was chapter number 46 of Kagurabachi, titled Unruly Punk. And yeah, thank you guys again so very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. And this will be Glowplasma 231 signing out, Bachi Bros.